Welcome to Money, Manifestation, and Business, the podcast that shows you how to use your energy, intention, and consciousness to reprogram your money mindset, unleash a new level of possibility, and create a life and business that lights you up. I'm your host, Jamie Berman, and I invite you to join me each week for a dose of inspiration, coaching, and teachings to help you rewrite your money story, create abundance on your terms, and grow your business in a way that's fully aligned for you. This is going to be so much fun. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. I have a super special guest on today. It is the amazing Haley Hatcher, who is the founder and CEO of Heart-Centered Podcasting, who happens to be the one who produces my podcast and has supported me so much in getting this podcast not only going, but also out in the world, impacting people. Haley's been absolutely amazing. And so I asked her to come on because as I'm working with entrepreneurs, there's always questions that come up around podcasting. When do I start it? When's a good time? What's the best way to increase listeners? And I just get tons of questions around it. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to write all these questions down and I'm going to get in Haley's head because she is an expert at this. And so she is going to be answering all of your questions today. So this episode is all about how to use a podcast to help increase your reach, help support your business, and really get your message out into the world, and how to make your podcast more impactful. So I know you're going to love it, and I can't even wait to hear all the wisdom that Haley shares. So thank you for being here, Haley.
Yes, I'm so excited to finally join the podcast. It's always fun when I get to kind of like go on the other side of the curtain and be the one on the podcast, but also producing it.
It's so fun. I love it. I want to hear first, before we dive into the questions, I'm curious, how'd you get into podcasting? Because I don't think I've heard your story of how you got into this business and all of that.
Yeah, definitely. So back in 2017, I was newly pregnant and I had just moved back home. I didn't have a job, but I found my first job that was completely online, which was a social media manager at a OBM company. And I worked there, and over time, our woman who was doing our podcast producing there previously, she went on maternity leave, and I was asked to kind of step in and fill in. So she trained me on a lot. And then when she got back, she was like, yeah, I don't want to do podcast producing anymore. And so I was able to just like stay in that role and just get the foundations and the skills needed. And then unfortunately, overnight, that OBM agency completely shuttered its doors. And my boss at the time, she said, Haley, I'll waive any non-compete. You can take the clients that you're working with now and you can open your own agency. Or if you don't want to do this anymore, that's completely fine. And so my kid, she was about 18 months old at the time. And my husband, he was just like, why not try it? Why not? And so I was like, okay, because I didn't want to have to like leave the house and pay for daycare and do all of that stuff. So I started Heart-Centered Podcasting, and I've been really lucky since then to not only like be fully booked for the most part, but just have like really amazing clients. I have some clients who they've been working with me since day one. And so it's been so fun.
That's amazing. That's one of those circumstances that feels like an oh no moment. It feels like an unfortunate situation, but then like in hindsight, looking back, it's like, wow, that was the catalyst for this. That is so amazing.
Yeah, for sure. Like at the time, it was definitely terrifying and I just felt so lost. But now, like looking back, I mean, my business is going to be like officially 5 years old in September. And I was like running the numbers, and it's just crazy to think about, like even numbers aside, just like how many people my business has impacted, not only like one-on-one with my clients, but like every single person who listens to their episodes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if 200 people listen, that's 200 people that my work got to impact.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It must feel so rewarding because it's similar to, that's how I feel about coaching and working with entrepreneurs and coaches, because it's like, yeah, whenever I coach someone, it's like the ripple effect of that. And if they go out and grow their business, it's amazing. And I mean, podcasting is the same, where yeah, the ripple effect is huge of you helping, supporting someone get something out there that maybe they wouldn't have otherwise, or it would have been a lot harder to do on their own. And yeah, it'd be fun to actually calculate, like in those 5 years, how many people listen to all the episodes that you've ever produced. It's probably massive, but that's so cool. I love it.
I tried to think about like how many episodes I've actually produced, but it was just too many numbers for me. So I'm just like, I'll just say like hundreds for now. And then down the line, I'll say thousands.
Yes. You're officially an expert. You have your 10,000 hours. I love it.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Yes. Well, that's why I'm so happy to have you here, because we want to talk to the expert herself and just dive into some of the things that are working right now, 2024, what you see in the industry, what you see working with your clients, what have all of that. So let's dive into some of the questions that came in. And yeah, so the first question is, what do you see working in the podcasting world right now for both like coaches and entrepreneurs?
Yeah, definitely. With podcasting, the foundational piece that always works is the authenticity and the vulnerability of it, right? Because when you are tuning into someone's podcast episode every single week, it's really intimate, right? Like they are in your ears. If you choose to watch, you're tuning into their faces, but you're creating relationship with them. And I think maybe that's not something that we think about every week when we're showing up to the microphone, but you really are creating relationship. And so my clients have found that when you have podcast listeners who tune in every week and they feel like they know you and they get the behind the scenes of your business, those people are the easiest people to sell to. It doesn't feel like you have to fight for the sale. It doesn't feel like you have to like sift them through the whole funnel, because they know you, they trust you. So I think like that is the foundational thing that's working. And when I hop on discovery calls with people, that's what I always tell people to look forward to. Like, hey, this is going to compound over time, and kind of just like be patient, but like the ROI will be there. Another thing too is, and I think this might be hard for some entrepreneurs, because as business owners, we feel like we need to have our hands in a lot of pots, right? Like we feel like we need to be doing Facebook ads, be creating the perfect welcome sequence, be visible on every single social platform. But I like to tell people, especially if they're newer in business, like let your podcast be the thing in your business, not just a thing in your business, right? Because when it is the thing in your business, you can pull everything from that. And if you think about even just one 30-minute episode, whether it's a guest episode or a solo episode, there is so much content there, and it becomes like literally a gold mine that you can pull from for years, honestly. And that can be audio, video, blog posts, quick social media posts, whatever that is. And so I think when you let it be the foundational content pillar of your business, a lot of the other things will become so much easier.
Oh my gosh. Yes, that is so true. Like, since I started my podcast, just even thinking about myself, we've cut our social media content creation in half on a weekly basis, because we get to pull a reel from the podcast. We get to pull, we can create a carousel from it. We can create a newsletter from it. And yeah, that's made a massive, massive difference, because the message, right, it can translate in so many different ways. So
yeah, exactly. And if you think about it too, like for all of your podcast episodes, we've only created 2 social media posts and like 1 newsletter from them. But if you ever, needed to take a vacation or wanted to take a month off or whatever, it would be so easy to go back to all of your past episodes and pull fresh content and act like it's something brand new that you're getting to share with your audience. And so I just think in that way, podcasting has a really long shelf life, I guess.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Amazing. And I wanted to ask you one other thing, because I completely agree with the vulnerability and authenticity. And I've realized that is the magic when it comes to selling or being really anywhere that you show up. And I used to actually say, because I used to stretch myself to be more vulnerable and like share more of me, and it's always feels so scary. But I would realize the more that I did it, the more that I would sign clients. So I like remember my first year, like really being serious in business. I had this line was the more vulnerable that I am, the more money that I make. So anytime I feel like, I'm scared to release this, oh my gosh, this feels really raw and vulnerable and authentic. Like I knew it would land for people. But
Yeah.
I'm curious, do you see just like with the people that you work with, like, are there any tips for being more vulnerable? What might that look like? Or yeah, do you have any ideas for that? Or
Yeah.
being more vulnerable and authentic, I guess?
I think honestly, it's just the practice piece of it. And even with you, Jamie, I remember the first couple episodes, like you were really hands on with the edits that we were making. And I would create the additional edit, the first edit, and then you would listen through and come back with other things. And so that list would get pretty long, right? But now we've gotten to the point where you have gotten better at showing up on the microphone and not like overthinking what you're saying or even like how you say it. And so that makes the editing piece like a lot easier. But just again, like practice and getting comfortable, whether it's with a guest or whether you're just talking to yourself on the solo episodes, getting comfortable with like pushing the boundaries, pushing what you would usually say, and just like remembering that you play a part in it, but also your audience does as well. Like your audience is made. I always tell my clients, whether it's with what you're saying in the podcast or what you're posting on social media, some clients might think it's too much or we're bugging them or they don't need to know this or whatever it is. I always tell them like, hey, your audience is made up of adult, most of my clients, women. Like they can unsubscribe if they want to. They don't have to listen if they don't want to. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so it's like, as
Yep.
long as you're feeling comfortable and it's feeling aligned with you, you'll see that shine through the messaging, through the content, and through the conversations that you have because of the podcast.
Yes. I love that so much. Yeah. And I notice like, I don't think, even for me as a listener of podcasts, because I love podcasts and I consume them, I like listening to a podcast from like a real human that's going through real human stuff. I don't want to listen to somebody who's just sounds perfect all the time or who's just giving tips or things like that. It's a little dull. It's a little boring. So yeah, I think remembering like people want to see maybe the human side of you or things that you're working through maybe after you've gotten to the other side of it and stuff makes all the difference.
Exactly. And that's why too, for everyone listening, like Jamie's my client, but she's also my coach too. And when I first started with her podcast, I was like, manifestation is not for me. You know what I mean? And I think probably like 5 episodes in, I messaged you and I'm like, hey, let me join the movement because like you literally not only like changed the way that I feel about manifestation, but like changed the way what I feel is like possible for me. But you did that through being vulnerable, through being authentic, because you shared your story of moving to LA, of your relationship with your body changing, of how you met your husband, XYZ. And so it felt like, oh, Jamie did this. Jamie came from, the same blue collar family that I come from, and it worked for her. So like, why not try it? What's the worst that could happen,
Amazing. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that. It's like, it's helpful to recognize that, like, because whenever you just show up every week and you're sharing, sometimes it's like you forget. And so I appreciate that. And there is evidence right there that if you just show up as the real you, like it can be impactful.
Yeah. And you probably think too, like, oh my gosh, how many times can I talk about this? How many times can I talk
Yeah.
about my move to LA? But like, if you had never talked about it like that 57th time that you talked about it, I wouldn't have heard it, And so
That's true.
I just like, that's something else I always tell my clients is just like be relentless with your messaging because you never know who is listening in for the first time ever.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. So I think that's another thing we might want to touch on just quickly is like, because I've heard a lot of people saying, God, I feel like I've shared this a lot. And they kind of want to go to maybe another place or what they're working through. But do you have any tips on that in terms of, how often to share a story, anything like that where people feel like, God, I just keep repeating myself.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you feel like you're repeating yourself, you're on the right track. And you will see this, right? If you just like sit down and look at your podcast stats, it's never the same amount of people that listen every single week. And so you, again, never know who's tuning in for the first time. And what you have to say, even if it feels like very repetitive to you, it could be the thing that they're tuning in to hear, the exact thing that they need to hear, the exact solution to their problem, whatever it is. And then they are automatically like an easy, I don't want to say an easy sale because it's more than that, but like you're bringing them into the fold and they trust you and now they're a part of your community. And even if they don't buy from you right away, I think another part of podcasting is like believing that every single listener will become a paying client someday. And until then, they're there to support you in whatever capacity that they can, even if it's like, oh my gosh, I've shared your episodes with so many people, and so just like things like that.
Hi, friend. Let me ask you something. Are you ready to up level your money mindset and really release the things that have been holding you back? Release your limitations and your money blocks and that self doubt and imposter syndrome that's been coming up for you, that's getting in the way of creating more abundance and more impact in your business. If so, I have the perfect opportunity for you that you're going to absolutely love. So mark your calendars for September 20th and 21st, because I am hosting my first ever abundance retreat live in San Diego, California. So we're going to come together and we are going to do the inner and outer work to create more abundance in your life. And I absolutely cannot wait for this. So picture it, me, you, and a group of soulful entrepreneurs coming together, doing a combination of coaching and other fun activities that are going to help you shift your energy and shift your money mindset in a massive way. My past retreat participants have said things like, I feel like I got 6 months of coaching in 2 days, because it's an immersive and a transformational experience. And it's so much fun. The people who come to these are amazing, and there's so much connection and networking that happens. And I just want to invite you in. And right now we have our early bird discount. So you can get some money off. All you have to do is go to the show notes and register. And I will see you in San Diego in September. It's going to be so much fun. Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So with that, I'm curious, do you have any strategies for increasing reach, right? If someone, let's say, has a podcast and they're like, I just have a couple of listeners every, or maybe 100 or something like that, or you're wanting to increase reach. Maybe you do have thousands or millions and you want to, you want to get your message out to more people. Are there some things you could tweak or strategies for that would help get the podcast out in the world?
Yeah. So if you want to grow your listeners, I think there's a few options that you can look at. But before you even start like jumping into strategy and tactics, I want you to remember that podcasting is very much the long game, the bigger picture, and like believing that the ROI is there, but you have to put in a lot of work before that happens. And I don't say that to be like pessimistic or anything, but stats show that on average, your week to week or episode to episode growth rate is only between like 1% and 2% growth. So if you have like 100 listeners, you might week to week, that might look like only 1 to 3 new listeners every week. And so just like keeping that at the back of your brain, like not letting it limit you, but also if that is what you're growing at, knowing that, okay, I'm okay. I'm not behind or anything like that. But when you do want to start putting in some action there, just like show up everywhere that you can. And podcasting really makes that easy because of all the different mediums that you can show up with. But the easiest thing to do is make sure your podcast is on all the destinations that you can get it on, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and even the smaller things like Pocket Casts, Overcast, and things like that. And your host, they should make that easy for you. Another thing is guesting. It's really important, but I think a lot of people, they think like it takes a lot of work, or they don't think that there is an ROI in it. But the more people you have on your show is good, but also thinking about the more shows that you yourself are on, because you are putting yourself in front of an audience who has maybe never heard of you before, and your show is going to be linked hopefully in that podcast show notes, and you can bring everyone with you essentially that listens to that episode. Always talk about your podcast and your work. Jamie, you do a good job of this, linking back to past episodes in emails or in show notes, or just like anywhere that you can talk about your podcast. And that makes it easier on you, right? Because you don't have to verbally give the same solutions over and over. You can say, hey, I talk about this more in episode 14 of my podcast. You can find it here. So just like letting your thought leadership expand wherever it can. And then some more tangible things that you can do, just like go back to your audience to figure out what's working, what's not working. And this can look like A/B testing different episodes where essentially you're talking about the same thing, but maybe one episode is 45 minutes long and the other episode is 20 minutes long. Maybe you're testing different titles, things like that. I've had clients do audience surveys to see which episodes are their favorite. How long do they usually listen to episodes for? If they're not listening anymore, what was the last episode they listened to? What do you want to hear more of on the podcast? Things like that. And then just dig into your stats as much as you can. Log on to Apple Podcasts Connect, log on to Spotify, see how many listeners you have, how many of them are engaged, because you can tell how many minutes they listen for. You can tell which episodes they love, which episodes are trending, and look at the content in those episodes and just like expand on what people already love.
Yeah, I love that. Totally. And we've done that with mine. And yeah, one of the other things that we recently started was running. I mean, if you run ads, you can run ads to your podcast too. And that increased, I know, listens for certain episodes. That's also great, like during a launch, if you launch and if there's certain episodes that would be helpful for that launch, you can run ads during that time. I know we did that.
Yeah.
And then you also recommended ManyChat. That's been awesome.
Yeah. And I want to say that too, just like increasing your sales using podcasting. A lot of people, I think, don't tap into this, but there's a lot of organic things that you can do to help increase sales. And we've done these, Jamie, but that looks like, host read ads and inserting those ads into your episode, whether it's manually inserting it into a single episode, or if your host allows for dynamic advertising, doing ads that way. And when I say host read, that means like you as the host are recording an ad for your offering, for your program. You're doing it leading up to it. You're creating one while doors are open. You're creating one, whatever that looks like, and making sure that all of the links are very accessible in the show notes. And then another thing too, Jamie, that you've done is like just recording really beefy client case studies. And you can get really deep with this. You can create, after you air the episode, you can create a really deep case study email that you send out to maybe people who have clicked on the cart page but haven't actually committed. You can send them this episode, pull out the juiciest quotes that really show the transformation that your offering provides, whether that's like a mindset transformation that your client talked about, a money goal that they hit or exceeded, that they talked about, and just like letting that shine. And then also with those case studies, put them literally right on your sales page. Put a header like, hey, listen to so-and-so's story with my program.
Good.
And you can,
Yeah.
you can literally embed the episode too to start. Like if they start talking about how much money they've made after the program at minute 15, you can embed the episode to start at minute 15. And so again, just like remembering all of the content that your show can provide and really capitalizing on that because it's free, right? You just have to do the work of getting it where you need it to go.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That's so good. I love it. And
Yeah.
it really does show you how much you could do with a single podcast, like
Yeah.
what that can do for your business. And I've loved doing client interviews. And the reason, again, because I am a podcast consumer too, and I love hearing other people's stories. It inspires me. It makes me say, oh my gosh, if they can do it, that's possible for me. So I try to bring as many of those in as I can, and I tend to do kind of like seasons with it where I'll have a bunch of back-to-back client interviews. I think it's so fun to hear wisdom from other people as well. But I love that idea. You can actually put those, like embed those in your sales page or in emails. That's such a great idea that I didn't even think of. I'm like, I'm going to do that.
Yeah. And a lot of people think like, oh, people don't like it when I have guests on the show. But time and time again with all of my clients, like their guest shows are the top performing episodes. I know that your episode, for instance, with Whitney is and has been since it aired the top downloaded episode. And it's like still to this day is growing. And so don't like underestimate the power of your client interviews.
Totally. 100%. I've gotten a lot of feedback on mine too, just because I've heard other people say that, like, oh, I don't want to have client interviews because it's not me. They don't want to hear it. I'm like, no, maybe that's just a thought because those episodes perform really well for me. And even as a consumer, I love listening to those. So I always thought it was interesting when people have that thought. So fun to play with. Okay. So when would you say is a good time to start a podcast? Like in someone's business journey, is there a better time or a worse time?
Yeah, I love this question. And a lot of the times when people hop on discovery calls with me, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, I want to start a podcast, but like, should I wait till, I've launched this program? Should I wait until I have this many email subscribers, whatever it is? And I'm like, no, you should not wait, because the thing about podcasting is I love a small audience for a podcast because they get to grow with you. And especially if you're just like starting out in business or you're really nervous to start your podcast, the great thing about a small audience is it's very low stakes, right? You don't have that many people tuning in right at the beginning. And so if you make a mistake, it's okay. You can get more direct feedback when you have a smaller audience because you know exactly who's listening to you. And then your audience too, they just get to grow with you. So as you grow in your business, as you're start to make more money, as you expand your offer suite, whatever it is, your audience is like coming right along with you. And so that there's something really special about, your audience and you growing at the same time. And the next thing too, about when is it right to start your podcast? I think just whenever it feels aligned and when you feel confident in your thought leadership, because the last thing that you want to do is like start a podcast and then you drop off with the consistency because you think that you have nothing more to add to the conversation or you ran out of things to say or whatever it is. So when you have gone through a couple launches or when you have gone through those ebbs and flows of businesses and you've really learn from your mistakes or learn from what you want to do new, then that's something that you can bring to the show. And that's something that is just going to, again, deepen that authenticity, deepen that vulnerability. And so when you feel ready to, I guess, be honest about all of that on your show, that's a really great time to start.
Yeah, to bring that vulnerability.
Yeah, exactly.
100%. And actually, it's funny, Haley, because I like always think, because I waited a while, right? Like to start my podcast. I could have started this a long time ago, but I was kind of like waiting until it felt like a hell yes,
Mm-hmm.
And while I'm glad that I did that, I also think there were so many misconceptions that I had. I thought it would be really hard to come up with content. I thought I wouldn't want to record every week. I thought it would be really hard for me to stay consistent. And what I find is that I actually am like the opposite. Like there's so much that wants to come through me. I had no idea, because I do think the more we start creating, the more creative we get. It's kind of like law of attraction. When you get into creativity, you get more creative. So I find that the more that I'm showing up to this, the more ideas that I have. So for anyone who's like scared of that, of like, oh gosh, should I start? I'm afraid of like not being able to be consistent. I just want to share from my own perspective. I had that same fear and I waited a while to get started. And now I absolutely love it. I don't feel like there's ever a week where I'm like, what should I say? I mean, sometimes, it just depends, but I can always find something. And I usually have a list of things that I want to touch on. So yeah, I think it's been so good for me in the beginning. Like you said, there were so many show notes because I was messing up so much. It took me forever to get through. It was very clunky, but like after, I don't know, what, a month, 2 months, it just kept improving and improving and improving. So if it feels really hard in the beginning, also just know, like, I think no matter what, I have had so much experience talking, sharing, being on video, but podcasting is a little different, just showing up to the mic. So I had to get my rhythm. So I also kind of went in with that expectation of like, this is a growing pain. I'm going to have to learn how to do this. But the more you do it, the faster it is.
I like what you said. I mean, you just touched on this a couple weeks ago in your episode that was like how to keep your manifestation. And you say just like stay in that creative mindset and creation mode. And that's so true, because the more you do it, the easier it gets, the more natural it feels. I've had clients who like their first couple episodes, they literally like scripted out the whole episode. But now it's like, okay, I want to talk about this. And they just riff and it feels so natural. Like you would never know. But I think if you're feeling overwhelmed or you're feeling scared of your ability to be consistent, my number one thing, and I tell this to people, and I have a freebie for this too that I can link below, but just like create a workflow. Because when you get that workflow down, every single task that needs to be done. You can batch that out in your project management tool so that you stay on track. I have clients who they record a month worth of episodes in one day. I have clients who record it like week by week. So just like whatever works for you. And then know that if you have to take a break for whatever reason, it's really not the end of the world, as long as you communicate to your audience that you're taking a break. As long as you give them something like in the meantime, then you're fine. And then obviously, like when you can, outsource whatever you can, because I think that's when podcasts become more successful, is when you can literally just like only worry about recording the episode and then everything else is done. And I think you can attest to that, Jamie. Like you just say, okay, here's the raw files. And that's literally the only thing you do until you check over the content.
100%. Totally. Yeah. And actually, I'm curious about that because I know a lot of people may have that question of like, should I do it myself or should I hire out, and should I hire an agency like yours? Mm-hmm. Like what do you think the differences are? Is there a better time to hire out? Is there a good time to learn it yourself? Do you have any take on that?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the times, I would say if you have the budget, hire it out from the beginning, because it's so much easier. And this is what you and I did, Jamie. Like it's so much easier. I worked with you from the launch, and then after I started managing your podcast. And so since we set everything up for you, it's easy as just to like jump into the management piece. So I would say the sooner you can do it, the better, because you're giving yourself not only more time freedom, but like brain space too, so that you can focus on, because your podcast isn't the only thing you do in your business. Like you still need to be coaching or whatever it is that you offer. And so if you can just give yourself an hour each week to record and know that the rest is done, then that will make your podcast feel so much more easy and aligned, and something that doesn't cause resentment, something that you can like be excited for every single week. Because if you're not excited and you're grasping for straws, your audience is going to be able to hear that.
Totally. Completely agree. That's one of my mottos is it's all like I really want to stay in my zone of genius as much as I can because it makes such a difference. Like whenever I am just doing what I am best at and I can delegate to others what they are best at, my business grows so much faster than whenever I try to DIY it and do everything myself. I become depleted. It's not even as good as it could be at all, right? So I hired you from the start and I did have the budget. If I hadn't, I probably, would have, what I did was I just waited until I had a budget.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I'm just not someone who likes to spend tons of time doing like things that I'm just not great at. So,
Yeah. I think
so
too,
yeah.
like when it comes to outsourcing or podcasts, and maybe you could speak on this a little bit, Jamie, is a lot of people, they think like, because not only am I like doing the editing for their actual audio, but I'm also writing the content. And a lot of people, I think that writing piece is hard to delegate because they think like, oh, it won't sound like me. But the greatest thing about podcasting and something that I really pride myself on is knowing my client's voice and like really nailing that because I'm tuning into their show every week. Like I'm listening to them over and over and over again. And so that's a craft that I've been able to pick up on. And so I don't know if you like want to speak about that at all. And if that was something you had to overcome.
So for me, I did not have a hard time delegating that because like that's not what I like to do. Like my thing is if I can just show up live, if I can coach, if I can get on video, if I can be with my people, if I can do my challenges, like that's the stuff that lights me up. The writing piece in business is not, I don't like it, right? It just depletes me. And while I can do it and while I am good at it, because of course, in the beginning, I did do all of that myself. Anytime I can delegate that, I am happy to. And I would rather spend the time helping that person learn my voice than I would actually me doing it myself. So that wasn't an obstacle for me just because it's not a piece that I like, And so I really don't like spending the time on it at all. And that's always a piece of my business that I'm like, okay, copywriting, let's delegate that as much as possible.
Yes.
I have ADD. I cannot focus. Like that is not my thing. I'm like, I want to be there with my people or recording or creating. And so, written content isn't my thing. So
definitely.
I really didn't have trouble with it. And I'm so beyond grateful that it gets done on my behalf, but it's still my message, right? It's still exactly what I share, but I don't have to be the one doing it.
Yeah. No one has been like, Jamie, I know this isn't you.
Totally. No, totally. 100%. Yeah. Because it is me. It's just you're pulling what I said and putting it into another format.
Exactly.
So beyond grateful.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I've loved this conversation so much, Jamie, but I'm curious. We haven't really got to really talk one-on-one much. So tell me, what has your biggest win or your biggest surprise been from having your podcast now that we are like over 40 episodes in?
Yeah. There's a lot, but I would say the biggest surprise is how much I love doing it. Because I was, again, like afraid that, it was just going to be another thing on my to-do list that I wasn't going to want to do every week. But it's not that. It feels similar to like when I get to show up and coach my clients. I feel like, I want to. That's like one of my favorite times of the week. Also, like thinking of what do I want to record this week and then recording the podcast. Like it feels like something I actually love that nourishes me. And that was a huge surprise. And I also I love it because it's content that gets to live on, right? Whereas like Instagram or social media, like someone's going to see that once and they're probably not going to see it again. No one's scrolling back 3 months in time to see what you shared, but a podcast can live on. Someone can start from episode 1 and go all the way back, right? So like, I think it's such an amazing resource. I've also seen that it's been super helpful for my current clients where a lot of the times that's where my episodes are inspired by, is like who I'm working with. And let's say something comes up and I think of something later, like, ooh, this would be good to dive into. I think this would be helpful for this person, because I know if it's helpful for one, it's going to be helpful for many. So I've also seen how it's really impacted my clients in such a positive way, and just expanded reach. So yeah, I think overall it's a massive win. And, I don't really pay super close attention to stats in terms of looking at it on a weekly basis. If anything, I'm just like, hey, let's look at like what's working. What do I want to do more of? How are the numbers? What kind of episodes are people liking? But I'm not really attached to how many listeners am I getting every single week? Because I want it to be just a fun thing that I do. I'm not like pushing it, trying to make it work. And I think that's what's worked. And with that, we do have a good amount of listeners and subscribers. So, and I haven't even been doing it for a year, which is wild. I'm like, I can't wait for 5 years down the line to see where this goes.
Yeah, exactly. And I know Jamie said she's not attached to the numbers, but she is a client of mine who, once her podcast launched, it just really took off. And I think, again, like you said, that is because you're not attached and you're showing up not just for the sake of showing up, but because you want to serve your clients, you want to serve your listeners. And I think that at the heart of it is really what is the precursor for success.
Thank you. And I'm so grateful for you, because it wouldn't be what it is without you. And I love working with you. You are so amazing at what you do. And so I would love if you're open to sharing like how you work with people, just because I know there's probably people who either have an existing podcast that they're ready to delegate, right? They're like, oh, that sounds really good to record for half an hour and send it off and everything else is done, right?
Yeah.
And then there's probably people who are like, I want to start a podcast. And I know you have a launch offer where if someone just wants to get it launched and going, you have that too. So can you share a little bit more about what your company does and what offers you have for people?
Yeah, definitely. So we are very lean with our service offerings, but we do that because I've like really refined them and known, okay, this is what works. So our launch package is literally everything you need to launch a podcast. And we do all the behind the scenes and then get your first 3 episodes ready for you. And then our management package, that is for our launch customers who want to keep us on to manage their shows, but also B, for that person who they've had a podcast, whether it's 10 episodes or 100 episodes, and they have the budget to delegate now, and they're looking for someone to do it in a heart-centered way, then come on over. We would love to support you.
Thank you, Haley. This was so great. Thank you so much for being here. I so appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for listening. I hope this episode is something that you'll be able to add to your manifestation toolbox to come back to when you need a little extra motivation. If you like what you've heard today and want to take it deeper, you've got to come check out my signature coaching program, the Money Manifestation Movement. It's the place where you'll not only learn manifestation, but you'll begin to live it alongside me and an amazing community of like-minded entrepreneurs doing this work together. Head on over to jamieberman.com to learn more.